Hello, my dear friends, fellow photographers, and travelers. Chris Lee here. A good evening and a weekend. I hope you are well and strong during this pandemic. And I'm very happy today that you can with me because I'm going to share with you my second travel episodes in my journey to another great nation, Peru. For those who have been following with me in the first episode, which I have introduced you the capital city of Peru, Lima. And today we are moving out from this great city to another coastal town, right? And I'm going to share with you today and to introduce you a very unique experience. Basically, we are going to have a close encounter with the wildlife. So in this episode, I'm going to share with you a tour to off-coast rocky islands that's near to a town under the name Paracas, and which form part of the Paracas National Reserve of Peru. So let's get a bit know where location is Peru for those who are first time with me. As far Peru is concerned, it's actually in the South American continent and located right below the equator, where basically it's considered as a southern hemisphere, right? And you look at the map in Peru, you realize that actually Peru is a long cylinder country whereby have been fronted with five nations. And we have equators on the north, we have the Colombia on the north as well. We have Brazil on the east, and we have Bolivia on the southeast, and finally we have Chile on the southern part of the border of Peru. And today I bring you to this beautiful coastal city with the name Paracas. And Paracas is also a place where they have gazetted as the Paracas National Reserve. And in this Paracas National Reserve, we are going to bring you to a very beautiful off-coast island. Let's share about some facts about Paracas, right? Now, Paracas is a coastal town as well as a tourist hub for the Ballestas Island, right? And the Paracas National Reserve is right located in the central western Peru, fronting the Pacific Oceans. It's also a popular beach resort for the southern Peruvian. Now, from here, tourists could have a close encounter with the wildlife and bird sanctuaries on the nearby offshore islands by taking a 2 hour boat ride around these islands. So we are actually bringing you now into a boat ride to have a close encounter with all this wildlife. So the location of Paracas versus Lima is basically in the southern part of Lima. And you can see that before you reach Paracas, you will come across a town by the name Pisco, before then landed to Paracas. But Paracas, basically, as I mentioned earlier, is a resort town, right? And let's move on further. So, it's my second stopover in Peru, and it's also a very exciting stopover. As far as concerned for my entire journey to Peru, I believe the Paracas have actually given me a lot of assignment. And one thing to ensure that if you are a photographer and you are coming to this part of the world, and we are actually going to bring you to close encounter the wildlife, then you realize that you have to equip yourself with the necessary camera gear. Particularly, you need a zoom lens, because while you are not allowed to land it on these islands, but rather you are actually taking picture of this wildlife on the boats, and the sea can be rough. Even though no matter how slow the boat is cruising on the sea, whereby there was some form of vibrations, and at the same time coupled with using of tele lens. So you have to make sure that you're able to take at high speeds. Right? So shutter speed must be very, very high. Right? So we need a good weather. I'm blessed that when I visit to these offshore islands itself, we have a very beautiful weather. So when, and as you say, that it's a coastal area, so you wouldn't be having any problem with high altitude sickness, right? And these is some of the images of this resort or coastal town, and you can see that on the right, sunny day itself, this is actually a beach, right? And you also have some form of entertainment, for the people, some sport, sea sport, right? Facility for the visitor and the tourists. And it happened to be this lady is having her fun in the middle of the sea. We captured in my image. So this is the jetty where we're going to have our boat rides, right? And this is some of the scene around this jetty area. And you can see that because this is not far from a bird sanctuary, and you can see that there are a lot of seabirds, a variety of wildlife birds, right? Particularly birds of this nature, the dark in color, the dark feathers, are abundant, and you can see that they occupy almost all the anchor. Those boats that anchor become their place of rest. So the boats are being colored very colorfully, so I managed to capture quite a fair bit of these images on those boats that park near the jetty. Birds everywhere. And there's one large bird quite nearby, on this park anchor boats, and I managed to snap some of these images. And of course, my tour mates also join in to have a close shot of this giant, not actually giant, but actually big birds. So as we are on the boat, and before you we are heading to these resort islands. As I said earlier, the boat ride is about 2 hours. So actually from the Paracas to the island itself will took about half an hour. Then we have basically an hour around surrounding these islands, and then you head back and a half an hour. So how the 2 hours have been used up. And as we are traveling along the way, all right, then you realize there's this giant cliff. And this giant cliff is part of this Paracas National Reserve, one of very, very unique sign or symbols that can found on the side of the desert hill. And these three-pronged candelabra, they call them candelabra jaw glyph, right? It's easily noticeable, right? Offshore. That's why we can see this even when we are on the boat rides, heading to the islands. And the size of this giant sign, or rather glyph, is about 50 meters in width and 150 meters in height. So that's why even from far, we can see it very, very clearly. This giant figure, right, etched into the sandy hills over hundreds of years, and is believed to have an ancient guide. It's as an ancient guide for the sailor, or as a connection to the Paracas line, not far from the Paracas, which also we share with you in the subsequent episode. So the island that we are going to be visiting will be using the name Ballestas Islands. But before that, just see how this sign look from far. And even at this stage, you can see at this area, you can start finding a lot of birds, right? It's actually stationed on the cliff, at the cliff of this hill, or this mountain range, or the ridge of the ocean coast. And after half an hour of ride, then we were landed. We are not actually landing on the island, but we are still on the boats. So let's share with you about this island by the name Ballestas Island, or in the local they call Isla Ballestas, right? So this island is a group of rocky islands located off the Pacific coast of Peru. These islands are part of the Paracas National Reserve and are classified as protected islands. And it's for this reason that visitors are not allowed to land on the islands. These islands are accessible via a coastal town, which I mentioned just now, is where we took our boats. There's Paracas, which is about 15 kilometers away. Now, these rocky islands are home to hundreds of thousands of birds, marine life, and fauna. Now, species of birds could be found here include guane, right? Guane cumarans, right? And then Peruvian booby and Peruvian persican, right? Now, the wildlife include Humboldt's penguins, and sea lion, as well as dolphin. And later on in my images, I want to share with you some of these images I have captured of all these named wildlife. Hence, most of the visiting tourists to these islands are with only one sole objective, that is to have a close encounter to all this wildlife, right? And which is rare in this region, also around the world. So hopefully that in this episode, I will give you an eye-opening of this wonderful place. Now, as I did mention just now, the tour was in a form of 2 hours of boat ride. So before we landed on, get onto the boats, we have been advised that the sea could be rough, and therefore we have been encouraged to take some medicines in preparing for the seasickness. On top of that, we are asked to put on the raincoat as well as a hat, because this is basically to prevent the falling bird feces onto your head, as well as a splashing in of the seawater into the boat, because the boat that we are taking is actually without any cover over our heads. So it's going to be a very, very exciting journey, all right? And at the same time, just to share with you later on, you can see that as you going through all the series of images there, I think they close about 100 images. Thereafter, I'm going to share with you about this bird sanctuary and wildlife sanctuary. And they found that actually, because of the abundance of these birds, all right, that's habiting in these islands, and they produce feces. The bird's feces had become a form of organic fertilizer. And because of that, periodically there are boats going to this island to harvest, right, to collect all these birds' feces and serve it as organic fertilizer, become one form of commodity that exporting from this region. So you can see that the amount of birds that present here can generate a form of business, right, a commodity in this region. Okay, without further ado, we move on to the photo proper. And this is a jetty that we are taking, all right, and this is a fare, right, and of course the currency is soles, right, so you can see the S stands for soles, Peru soles. And here, this is the type of boat that we are taking, You can see that it's without any roof over our heads, and that's why I say that we have to watch out for stormy weather. But fortunately, during our journey, the sea is very calm to a certain extent, and not as rough as what they expected, and therefore not many of us are having any seasick. Of course, there are also boats that have a cover over it, but this is not the one that we took. Here we come close to this Ballestas Island, and you can see that beside the birds that station on the land area, you can see those are in the sky, in the air. Is also quite a number of them. And of course, there's a jetty, and I believe this is a jetty for a larger size boat to anchor to actually basically the collection of the feces, which I mentioned just now is become one form of exporting commodity in this region. Here we are, the Rocky Islands. There are many of just small islands, right? Of course, the largest one will be the islands Ballestas. So this is just a general view of the islands, a rocky island, a tiny island that's surrounding the big islands around these regions. And you also notice that there's a lot of birds, right, on each of every small rock projection above the sea. Of course, there are few species of birds, not limited to one single species. There are few species of birds. Later on, you will have a chance to have an up close see the type of species of bird that you can find in these regions. Interestingly, that the different species of bird, they don't gather together. In fact, you can find that certain species of bird were found in certain portion of the island or certain part of the island. Then on the other corner of the island itself, the species of bird again is different. Do you notice that sea lions? Right, of course it's quite far, but I believe that your eye is good. You could already spot a sea lion taking its rest. I can see that from far, at the topmost of these rocky islands. Actually, the projecting tiny projection, all these are the birds. It's thousands of them. Here, I'm bringing you closer, right? And of course, it's not safe to go too close because the condition of the sea, that your boat can be more stable away from the coastal area of this small tiny island. You can see the wave that hit on the rocky island itself, the splashback. So you can see that it's very unstable. So our boat did not get close to all these tiny rocky islands. So in these instances, you need a tele-lens to go up close to bring the image closer to you. So for those who are using their handphone, I believe that they will have a problem because you are unable to zoom in to get a clear pictures. Now, do you see the black spot? The whole black spot are actually birds of the same species. They stood so close together, it's almost covered the whole piece of land, and they form a black spot from far. Right? You can see that just counting by the number of the area that cover, this is just a big area, and yet they can cover just a big area. You can imagine the numbers of birds. The quantity of the birds is tremendous. So a closer view, you hardly can count. I challenge you. You tell me how many thousands of birds are found in this island. I think, forget it. You can't count it. Right? So many of them. Right? They are the lower portions. So you can see the birds. There are two species. The white a bird with a white feather, was not cruising to the left side, and the bird with the black feather was cruising to the other side. So they don't really come into each other. You know, although they can be quite near to each other, but they don't mix. They do not mix. So this is a much closer image of all those birds found on these Ballestas Islands. It's just bird everywhere. No. So as for that, my camera shutter was non-stop, and as far as concerned, I have to using continuous shooting modes to capture, because and also at high speed, because the boat is moving, and the chances that some of images may not be clear and sharp. So I have to try my error. Maybe out of 10 images itself, there are 2 or 3 images are sharp, because they are on the moving boats. Here is much closer image of the birds. And you can see the whitish colors on the rocks. These basically are coating by the feces left behind by the birds. So we're getting closer now on the view of this bird sanctuary. Apparently, these species of birds, and there are 2 species that are most abundant. There is one which completely have a black feather with a white head, which you can see in the image. This is actually one of the most abundant species of bird found in these islands. So now I'm giving you a much closer view of these birds that stood on the rock face. So that's why I say that you need a telelens in order to able to capture images of the birds at this close distance. And this is another species of bird that's also found very abundant. And you can see that the white coating I mentioned just now, there is actually the feces left behind by all these birds over time. And of course, you have found this another third species of bird that we get encounter, but its number is very much less. And now you can see a penguin, and the sea lions. Sea lions will tend to scatter near to the coastal at the lower regions, and they like to hide into the cave. I think because they are taking the shelter. And during the daytime, because our tour happened to be in the afternoon, so it's very very hot. So I can understand that all these wildlife are taking the shelter, right? So many of them, right? Some are huge in size. I think these are the elderly sea lion. And some of them was actually find themselves on these small outcrops, right, at the middle of the sea. and lazing off their time, relaxing, have a suntan. These are all various style of shape and size. Then when close the evening, when we are about to return, you find that the flocks of birds are flying. And this is where the area, this is the time where we are asked to watch out, because as they're flying, they can do their business. This is where the fishes are dropping from the sky. And that's where we have been asked to put on our hat at all times. Otherwise, we believe that if you get any of fishes drop on your head, you are going to strike a lottery, all right? So hopefully some of us have strike lottery after the trips. So you can find the birds are flying everywhere, across the ocean. So that is about what I'm going to share today, this beautiful, amazing wildlife sanctuary, right, in these Ballestas Islands. I hope you have enjoyed. If you like my episode, you like my travel channel, please subscribe the channel and give me a thumb up, and please share to your friends. And particularly in these pandemics, where most of us have the lockdown, staying at home, I hope that you can share with your friend and family so that they can be like you, touring the world virtually at the comfort of the home. Or those you cannot fly. But in Chris Lee Travel Channel, we are going to bring you all my beautiful images of my travel around the world. And this Peru is my number 7 nation that I'm introducing to you. All right, please stay tuned. We have another 6 episodes to follow up on my journey to Peru. And I hope you are staying strong and you are healthy, and hope to see you again in the coming weeks. All right, and see you next Saturday, and please support my channel. And thank you very much for viewing.